Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the content patch for the 11th of June 2013. Yes, all of those dates. My name is TotalBiscuit with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, we're going to be covering the Xbox One conference from E3. E3, of course, will be dominating the week, and we'll be picking the most interesting news from it. And since this is recorded a day in advance, the event hasn't actually begun yet, so we're talking about the conferences, very specifically the Xbox conference. So, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to go through the Xbox conference and talk about everything that was revealed within it. So, shall we begin? Sounds like a good idea. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. Alright, well, they certainly kept their promise of sticking to the games for the most part, aside from their excessive desire to deal with SmartGlass. That was actually one of the weird things about this conference. Before we talk about the games, let's talk about the thing that really didn't need to be there, and then also the things that weren't there. So, the original conference for the Xbox One barely had any games in it whatsoever and was focused almost entirely on television, as well as the functionality of the Kinect, right? Now, since then, everything's really gone all quiet on the subject of the Kinect, aside from the announcement by Microsoft fairly recently that yes, you will need to have the Kinect plugged into your machine in order to actually get the bloody thing to work. Now, they did not really mention the Kinect whatsoever during this presentation. They completely avoided the very presence of it for the most part. Indeed, they actually used tablets and phones more than they did the Kinect in this entire thing, which is a very interesting thing indeed. And more to the point, the actual Kinect was used in more of the third-party publisher conferences than it was in the Xbox conference, which indicates to me a rather distinct desire to avoid the bloody thing at all costs. It's interesting, they seem to realize that it's something of an anchor around the neck of the Xbox One in terms of PR right now, so they dodged it. And yet, they focused on SmartGlass, which is something which has been around for Xbox 360 for a while and has fairly limited use, honestly. The main problem I've got with it is that they seem to be shoehorning it into various games, including Dead Rising 3 of all things, which has a SmartGlass option to drop an artillery strike with your phone. Because I have 3 hands, right? Microsoft, usually good to remind people that if you're holding a controller in 2 hands, having your phone in, I don't know, your mouth isn't going to be a suitable way of gaming. I mean, I'd give them all the credit. They managed to find a dumber way to interact with your console than the Kinect. Voice commands during games are pretty dodgy. Messing around on your phone during games, which is demonstrated in several of these titles, that's even more ridiculous. I can understand the idea of companion content, really. I get it. It's nice to have that kind of functionality from time to time, and there are some good uses for it, but shoehorning it into the game is not one of them. Provide something ancillary, provide something useful that actually provides information when you're not at the console. There is no reason to have all of this stuff on a tablet when you are playing on the console. You have only 2 hands, both of them will be on the controller. I don't want a tablet next to me on the sofa with information or on my knee that way I have to look away from the console or the screen or anything like that. That's dumb. So the weird push on SmartGlass during this conference was probably one of the most strange things I could have possibly imagined. It's really, really weird when juxtaposed with all of the other games that they actually showed. So, let's talk about the games. Phantom Pain, Metal Gear Solid, this actually opened up the show. Interestingly enough, opening up the show with a game that is not, in fact, an Xbox One exclusive. Major Nelson accidentally, quote-unquote, tweeted that it was an Xbox One exclusive, and then after a little while decided, yeah, we're going to correct that. Sorry, guys, that was a mistake. It's not an Xbox One exclusive. How he could not have known that, I really don't know. But the tweet actually remains up, which is really odd. Now, there's a lot of rumors circulating that indicated that Microsoft was actually paying publishers to only show certain titles on Xbox One even though they were multi-platform. Now, at the time of recording, I don't know how true this actually is, simply because I haven't had a chance to watch the PlayStation conference yet. It's not on yet. It's difficult for me to know. It seems like there will be a few titles that actually do end up being shown on multiple things, but again, pretty hard to know. But what I can tell you for a fact is that there was a big push on the exclusive side of things, right? And even when the game wasn't an exclusive per se, they pushed the notion that it was an exclusive on console, like Titanfall, for instance, that we'll get to later. That's not actually an Xbox One exclusive, even though they claimed it was. It's Xbox 360, and PC. Yeah, so it is coming out to PC, something to consider there. The notion that Metal Gear Solid will actually be an Xbox exclusive would be very odd indeed, and there's been no confirmation of that whatsoever. In fact, quite the opposite. So, I mean, it was a good trailer to open it up with, because, hey, it's a Hideo Kojima trailer. I mean, God. I mean, it was a pretty cool thing to watch. It had most of the tropes that tend to define those games, but the idea of an open-world stealth game in that kind of setting, I'm not usually into that, but looking at it, it is a game I really want to play. Now, they had to shoehorn in stuff about the 360. I don't really want to cover the 360 games at this point because it's kind of pointless. They did unveil a new SKU for the 360, which is a slightly slimmer version, although it's slightly more expensive. It actually offers apparently no advantages whatsoever over the current Xbox Slim, so as far as I'm concerned, this particular refresh of the hardware is an absolute waste of time and money, but there you go. They pointed out a couple of 360 games, but that's not really the focus of what I'm talking about here. So the only thing I think that's worth mentioning is the fact that they've got World of Tanks on 360 and then Xbox One. This seems to be the start of a rather interesting arms race that is most likely going to end up involving League of Legends in some way. I really do think it will, honestly. Any console to actually grab League of Legends would gain a significant upper hand in the free-to-play wars, and that's what's currently starting. PlanetSide 2 as well as Warframe have been confirmed for PS4. We now have World of Tanks for 360 as well as Xbox One. So I have to wonder what other free-to-play games we'll actually see on both the next-gen consoles. You've got to bear in mind this is a very important arms race because these numbers, stuff like World of Tanks, it has like 60 million players. They are crushing any console game on the market. That's something that you have to consider. So console manufacturers do want a piece of that particular pie. Okay, the first exclusive that they showed was Rise, which appears to be a third-person pseudo-historical game based in the Roman era. It's a third-person action game, bit of a spectacle fighter. It seemed visually impressive, but also heavily scripted. More to the point, the combat, which is what really surprised me, seemed ridiculously QTE heavy. Now, I'm not just talking about press X to execute. Yeah, that's not a QTE. I'm talking about multiple button presses and highlights above the heads, over and over and over again. As in, it seemed like the game wanted to take direct control out of your hands as much as possible in the actual combat. I don't understand why you would do that. I'm hoping that they take that away, or that was just part of the demonstration just to highlight a few things for whatever reason. It had this obnoxious slowdown almost all the time, very Spartacus-like, actually, that being the newer series on Stars, not the original. And it just didn't work for me as a core gamer. I don't want that control taken away. If I'm going to play a spectacle fighter, I need the ability to pull off combos and learn different moves and things like that on my own, and be able to fluidly go from person to person without the game holding my hand. And there's plenty of examples, even on PlayStation 2, of that working. So, something to consider there. You do not need to put all of those button prompts in the next gen. Hopefully, it will end up being interesting and they're able to polish that out, because it does look like a pretty cool game, and it certainly is a great era to set a game in. Surprisingly enough, we don't actually have enough Roman games. I don't really know why that is, but there you go. Right, now this was followed by Killer Instinct. Pretty damn short, this one. A little bit of a teaser. Now, of course, I was super excited to see Killer Instinct, one of my favorite franchises from back in the day. Really, really cool fighter franchise. Brought back to life. What I was not excited by is the fact that it seems to be in development by Double Helix Games. Double Helix Games do not have a sterling reputation by any stretch of the imagination. Now, it did say Rare was involved in some way. The logo was there, but it didn't indicate just how much. Double Helix appears to be the primary developer here, and in their rather storied history, they have developed Silent Hill Homecoming, considered to be one of the worst titles in the entire series, G.I. Joe Rise of the Cobra, which was movie shovelware, Front Mission Evolved, considered to be one of the weaker titles in the franchise, MX vs. ATV Reflex, which actually was okay. I believe they only did the Windows version of that, if I recall correctly, though, so I don't think they were even responsible for the full development of it. We also had Greenlight and Rise of the Manhunters, which was, in fact, one of the worst games of 2011, according to Angry Joe. Battleship, one of the worst games of 2012, according to Angry Joe. That is not a good resume. Not at all. And that is not the kind of company that I personally trust to deal with a franchise like Killer Instinct. What I saw of it looked good, but it doesn't matter what it looks like. It's a fighting game. It's got to feel good. It's got to be precise. It's got to be visceral. So I'm a little doubtful. Actually, a little doubtful what I'm talking about. I'm very doubtful that this thing will actually be any good. I mean, this team has some of the guys from Shiny that worked on Enter the Matrix, for God's sake. The thing which basically killed Shiny, one of my favorite developers of all time. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was a fairly terrible Xbox game. So I'm not too confident. I'm sorry. I'm not too confident in this. It may very well be absolutely awful. I'm just hoping there's a lot of rare oversight here. What we saw in the little demonstrated duel was okay, but again, since we didn't see advanced players, it really didn't matter all that much, and for the most part, they seem to be focused on the video upload capability and the Twitch capability. Interesting little arms race going on between Twitch and Ustream, of course. Twitch is by far and away the most popular video game streaming site, although the PlayStation 4 integration with Ustream may very well provide it with legitimate competition. This is good for gamers. Do not misunderstand me. It's very good for gamers. You want that competition in the space. The video uploading stuff, again, is the kind of thing we've already seen with the PlayStation 4, so it's not really a huge surprise. Twitch chat integration into games, I'd rather kill myself. Now, we move on to another exclusive by the name of Sunset Overdrive, which is by Insomniac, responsible for Ratchet & Clank, as well as Resistance Fall of Man. Recently, they did a multi-platform release called Fuse, but the interesting thing is that Sunset Overdrive is supposedly an Xbox One exclusive, as far as we can tell anyway. A lot of this stuff was a little bit unclear during the conference, and no doubt we'll find it out later, but historically, these guys have been a Sony developer. Ratchet & Clank, Spyro, all of this stuff has been developed for Sony consoles, but this, of course, is a little bit of a flip of allegiance for them. One way or the other, we have a game that looks to be very colorful and very interesting in terms of style, something that Fuse looked like when it was called Overstrike before EA took all of the fun out of it. So we may very well have a very enjoyable co-op shooter with some open world and parkour elements and some rather interesting weapons and hyper-stylized combat. Lots of blue and orange in there. I definitely don't disagree with the color palette choice. Blue and orange is it's nice, it's pleasant, everyone seems to like that. It's been a thing for the past couple of years, especially in movie posters. But I think that was probably one of the highlights of the conference for me, actually, just because it just looks like a good piece of fun. And it seems like there's a possibility for some very out-there weapons, and that's something that I'm very interested in. Forza 5, obviously we knew about this already with a bit more information. It's Forza. There's not really much for me to actually say about it. This whole drivatar thing, which is a strange phrase indeed, the idea of AI that kind of learns from you and supposedly can actually race against other people while you're not playing and earn you experience and things like that. Yeah, I mean, it might be interesting, but I know of something else that drives like a human. A human. Turns out you can do multiplayer in those games. Who knew? So maybe this is a piece of redundant technology. They then broke out Minecraft, yes, another version of it for Xbox One, claiming that bigger multiplayer and bigger worlds, so in other words, it's not quite as hamstrung as the version for the Xbox 360. Always interesting to see that every other version of Minecraft that's not on PC, despite the fact that the game will run on a potato, admittedly not very well, is actually inferior to the PC version. But hey, I mean, it's a multi-platform release, it's a huge franchise, it's a huge title. There's no way that you wouldn't bring this onto a console if you had the chance, because it's just guaranteed money, and loads of people want to play Minecraft, so hey. Nothing wrong with that, just interesting that they talked a lot about indie games and then basically just showed Minecraft and nothing else. We then saw Quantum Break, or more accurately, we didn't see Quantum Break. What is this game? Can someone please tell me? I know it's by Remedy, I know that's a companion television series, I know there's some synergy between the two, but nobody knows what the game is. It's actually incredibly frustrating. I'd say it looks cool, but I don't know what it looks like at this stage. I have no idea. Is it Remedy being deliberately mysterious? Don't get me wrong, I trust in the Remedy. Remedy's a good development house. They'll probably pump out something that's pretty decent, but I would just like to know what Quantum Break is. It will be good. It will be really nice. Now, the highlight of the show for me, it's gotta be Project Spark. When I first saw this come on, I thought, oh, great, they made Little Big Planet, and then rapidly realized, this is way better. Holy crap, look at this. Look at what you can do. You can make games within games, and yet the game is a game, which is, of course, the same as Little Big Planet, but the way that they did it is what really got to me. Possibly the only smart use of SmartGlass, but also a smart use of Kinect. One of the only examples of them really doing that, saying, all right, yeah, I can use the Kinect to browse menus. I can do this Star Trek thing where I'm like, Xbox, do this, do that, do all my work for me. I'm a game designer, howdy-do-do. And what they did inside of the world looked like it was incredible fun. It was colorful, it was bright, it was creative. The notion of being able to swap out different AI brains into various objects is kind of Scribblenauts-esque, but it seems like they've refined it into this really interesting co-op multiplayer experience, and you can just go on adventures and create a world to have an adventure in. It looks phenomenal. More to the point, it seems like there may be some connection to Windows. They did mention Windows 8, like they're doing some testing with Windows 8 right now. Windows 8 generally indicates we have some tablet stuff going on with it, but it may mean that there's a Windows version of this coming, in which case, great. Looks like Spore, but not terrible. It was really enchanting, honestly. That was the highlight of the conference for me by a country mile. I think it was for most people, judging by the reaction of the audience, and that was a thing. That really, really was. That's what games are to me. So I'm really hoping that that comes out well and plays well. Now, something that did not play well on stage, that would be Crimson Dragon, because the audio didn't work, and unfortunately it resulted in the audience hooting, hollering, and generally being a bunch of twats, but it's a shame because it's by the creator of Panzer Dragoon. It looks very much like Panzer Dragoon, and I like Panzer Dragoon, so I was like, yeah! And then no sound and some guy making pew 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 noises in the background. Well, I think we can definitely tell the caliber of people that turn up to those conferences, but I'm hoping that it doesn't suck. I really, really do. It looks pretty cool, so I would like to see more of it. I really need to know whether or not it's just a rail shooter like the original Panzer Dragoons, or whether it's more like Saga. I'm hoping it's more like Saga, but maybe that is just wishful thinking. Dead Rising 3, this will actually be an exclusive for the Xbox One, which is kind of disappointing to me because I enjoyed playing it on PC, but the original Dead Rising was also an exclusive. No, I don't count Chop Till You Drop, that was dreadful. This probably was my biggest disappointment so far of the show. It really looks like they've taken all of the fun out of it. Yes, you've still got your combo weapons and things like that, but everything's just grey and brown and dust and mud, and it seems way too gritty. The protagonist had no little witty one-liners to throw out there. There was no sense of absurdity to the demonstration whatsoever. It seemed more like a hardcore survival game with zombies in it. No, that's not what Dead Rising is. The cool thing about Dead Rising was that it had a fairly serious plot interjected with the absolute absurdity of the situation and the things you could do. I mean, Dead Rising 2, you could go around in what was basically a wheelchair with miniguns and saw blades attached to it. In Dead Rising 1, you could take a faucet, stick it in the zombie's head, and then take photographs and get points for it being funny. You could do all sorts of things in that game. It really never took itself seriously whatsoever. And it seems like Dead Rising 3 is not going to be that, and this worries me greatly because it seems like they're just moving towards what they think Western gamers prefer and taking the interesting Japanese quirkiness out of those titles, which really made the games for me. You know, those games are really funny. You could do all sorts of crazy stuff in it, so I'm very worried about Dead Rising 3, honestly. Based on the footage that I saw there, I'm extremely concerned, but we will see. Battlefield 4 was shown. I think, honestly, I prefer to talk about this when I do my recap of the EA conference because there was an awful lot more information there, and they didn't really show a huge amount. Just a little bit of single player there. They showed the multiplayer, which is way more interesting in that. Although the interesting thing to point out about Battlefield 4, of course, shown during the Xbox conference, was it appears to have been played on a PC. The reason why we say that is because the battle log icon in the top right of the screen has a backspace next to it. It is entirely possible it's just a development build that they ported over, but it seems quite likely that that was actually played on a PC, so we really don't know just how good the Xbox One version is really going to look there. Halo 5. That was the second biggest disappointment of the show to me, because I didn't think it was Halo 5. I thought it was something else entirely. We don't know if it's Halo 5, but since it includes Master Chief, it seems fairly likely. The whole trailer, they went through with the character kind of in some kind of cloak, completely disguised, and we had no idea who he was. He's wandering through a desert, and then this huge mech thing comes out, like, whoa, this looks amazing. I wonder what new IP this could be, and then suddenly Master Chief, like, oh, it's a Halo game. Balls. Well, yeah, there you go. The last game, before I talk a little bit about the price point and round up the show, was Titanfall. This is, in fact, a multi-platform release, Xbox and the PC. This is the first game from Respawn, and quite frankly, it is looking pretty cool. It's got a bit of asymmetry to it. That's what I think is really cool about it. The idea that you can get into these Titans, and I can only imagine that Games Workshop is going to be suing the crap out of Respawn any moment now for that, but you can get into these Titan mechs, and they're way more powerful than your average foot soldier, but those soldiers actually have means to take these things down. and they do so by doing a lot of wall running, parkour, climbing up the mechs, attacking weak spots, doing a little bit of Shadow the Colossus on top of them. Yeah, it looks cool as hell, quite frankly, and I will take any new multiplayer shooter that doesn't involve M16s. So I'm all over Titanfall. It definitely looks like a very impressive title, and of course, since it is coming to PC, we'll hopefully get to enjoy it in its full glory. Now, the last thing I want to talk about, because that's really all they actually covered in this conference, was the price point, and then maybe I'll just tell you what I thought of the conference overall. The price point, $500, 500 euros, or around, I think it was £420, which, if I recall correctly, actually translates to a pretty hefty tax on the UK guys there. The euro cost, if you were to take that and actually translate it to dollars, would in fact be $662 US. So there are taxes you need to bear in mind, but I have a feeling even with that, that really isn't exactly fair. And then if you were to do the translation from pounds, if you take £420 and then you translate it using today's currency exchange rates, you're looking at $654. Now, we can do a few calculations here. The current value-added tax in the UK for stuff like that is 20%. So if you do the calculations, if you expected it to be a 20% tax, then you take your 500, you do 20%, that takes up to $600. The overall cost of the console in the UK is $654, so it is a $54 extra fee for something that we don't know. I mean, it's just $54 more expensive when you count in the tax. And you can't dodge the tax. Sorry, that's just how it is. 20% VAT in the UK. Price-wise, this has obviously been jacked up by the inclusion of the Kinect, and that should be blindingly obvious. It seems like the PS4 could actually beat it. Admittedly, the PlayStation 4 is a more powerful machine. We should not forget that. It does have GDDR5 in it. That is more expensive than what they've put in the 360. It is something that can just generate about 50% more graphical power according to the tech. Yeah, we don't know for sure exactly how the performance is going to be, but looking at the tech specs, it would appear that it is capable of 50% more graphical performance, so maybe that actually brings the price in. We still don't know what's going on with the controller for that thing either, because we've heard very little about the Kinect-like sensor that they're using with the front bar, but it would appear to be some kind of adaptation of the PlayStation Move technology more so than anything else there. Price tag wise though, what really interests me is the notion that they seem to be pushing this as an entertainment box, yet for $500 I do not see that many people buying it as an entertainment box. This seems like a console that is aimed at core gamers. It's not heavily subsidized, it's expensive, and you can do most of the stuff you can do on it with a normal Xbox, with a smart TV. Hell, I mean, you can do a lot of that stuff with the Wii. A lot of that functionality is not actually that important to people that are looking for an entertainment box as opposed to a gaming machine. So it seems to me like the thought that Microsoft started off on the wrong foot is really coming back to bite them in the ass now. Yes, they're showing games. Great. And the games, for the most part, look pretty good. I'm happy that they're showing a lot of games, but there is still that elephant in the room that they started off by saying, this is an entertainment machine, look at all this television stuff you could do. Oh yeah, it's going to cost $500. And yet it's going to appeal to a market, that being the core gamer, that isn't actually interested in that notion. So, what is the machine? We still don't really know what they're trying to do with it. It almost seems like they're trying to appeal to several things at once and may very well end up sacrificing one for the other. Bear in mind, core gamers don't care about Kinect, right? So if you take the Kinect away, then suddenly you've got a cheaper machine, you've got less privacy concerns. What about if you take away all of that technology that allows you to do the whole TV thing, which supposedly eats up an awful lot of RAM as well? You can make a more powerful gaming machine that's able to actually put out that performance. So it's concerning. The conference was pretty good, yeah? Showed a lot of good games, had a lot of good speakers, for the most part, at any rate. It had a lot of good games on show, but there are still a lot of lingering questions. They deliberately dodged a lot of the stuff about the used games. They didn't explain anything beyond that. Of course, they wouldn't. You know, it's a showpiece for them. And annoyingly enough, since they cancelled the roundtable afterwards and they actually cancelled the one-on-one interviews, it's unlikely that we'll learn all that much more about the machine during this E3. But for a game show, it showed good games. I guess that's really all we can ask, and we will learn more about the machine as we go forward. And we also know, of course, that it will be coming out this year, most likely in November. Alright, folks. That's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. If you would like a more humorous take on this, then by all means go and watch part 1 of my cynical redub of the Xbox One conference. A little bit less serious, a little bit more snark, and before I go, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. One Must Fall 2097. There's a bloody classic for you, isn't it? Oh, yes, indeed. I have a remix from it. Yes, someone actually did that, if you can believe it. It is called One Must Fall 2097, and You Must Dance. It is by a composer called Digi-E. It is one of only 2 remixes of tracks from this particular game. This one's from 2004. It is a remix of the Power Plant track, and the original composer was Kenny Chow. Something to get your blood pumping, something a little bit classic. My name has been TotalBiscuit. Thank you very much for watching once again, and I will see you next time.